So I was telling you about actually the problems which came up with the lockdown or the shutdown or the curfew or whatever you may call it, because it was unplanned and it was not announced, and there wasn't even earlier warnings about it. So as a result of that, first of all, we had to get adjusted to the shock and attend to urgent things and do the winding up. And we still did not know how to contact our customers and tell them when we are going to resume, because probably the local customers, they knew. They themselves probably shut down before us. But some of the foreign customers we have, they were calling and asking, what is happening? When are you going to deliver our orders, etc. So we had to explain to them, this is the situation, and we ourselves are not sure when we can restart operation. But no sooner we are in a position to supply your orders, we'll let you know. And they wanted constant communication lines to be maintained. So in a crisis like this, that's the lesson one. You should not lose regular communication with your supply chain members, both downward as well as upward. Because both sides will be anxious when there is uncertain, or if we cannot tell them exactly what is happening to shipments that are either partly delivered or which had arrived at customs or ports or whatever, and whether those are being cleared, when will that be cleared, and there were so many issues. So therefore, you need to maintain constant communication as to what is happening. And anyway, now even the supplier countries have now gone into lockdowns and shutdowns. So right now in the month of April, there's nothing happening anywhere in the world. But still we'll have to make payments to our employees, because that's an obligation we have. And biggest challenge is really how to finance it. Because our financial supply lines are all dried up. So we need to be working with the reserves, that is the banks, and the government concessions that are provided are very much needed to ensure that continuity and managing this part of this period of uncertainty. I would say the period of uncertainty, because we do not know whether we can resume or not. Because it was, we were very happy when we were told that, okay, from this week everything will be normal. But then just a few minutes back, the notice came in Kalambudi and Gampaha, Kalutara, these districts, the curfew will be extended till 27th Monday. So only on 27th we have to reschedule whatever we planned for Wednesday now. So that's a bit of a tricky situation, especially with the international customers, because some of the, let's say there is an Indian customer who wants to buy our material, and then he has to give delivery dates to another customer in Japan. And so it is not a case of supplying to someone next door or in your village or in your district. So because today the businesses are, I would say, almost all businesses, whether you are small or big or whatever, in some way or the connected to the global supply chains. So it's part of global supply chain. So when you become that, this kind of, actually COVID-19 is a much bigger challenge to such companies. Yeah. So that's what we are facing at the moment. So from a supply chain point of view, I think Sri Lanka did not understand. Sri Lanka did not understand what supply chains are, because most people think supply chains are, that is procurement. That is calling a few quotations, identifying some suppliers, and having the transport and logistics to get the materials down to wherever you want. Unfortunately, that is not the supply chain. In today's context, supply chain is something which starts Really, we don't know from where, but we mostly know where the supply chain ends up, because supply chain ends with the final consumer of the product, not a customer, consumer of the product. So before it gets to the consumer, it passes through so many different businesses. So we are all part of that supply chain. So each of us will be delivering adding a certain amount of value to the products and services which are flowing through the supply chain, and we will collect what is due to us for the value we have added when the reverse flow occurs. So the reverse flow is cash from the final consumer comes all the way up to the material suppliers at the very beginning, wherever they are. So to ensure the two flows and make sure that the consistency and the continuous flow is maintained is the responsibility of all the members. Otherwise, there'll be delays and there'll be unfulfilled orders, and there are a lot of customer dissatisfaction coming in, and financial losses can come in. So many things can happen if that continuity is not maintained. So maintaining continuity in an uncertain atmosphere is itself is a major risk. So all the supply chains have risks, and those who are involved in supply chains, those who are working as partners or members of the supply chain, need to understand the risks that are directly affecting and risks that can be managed within their scope. So this is how you have to do that in advance, and that is how you build a resilient supply chain. So Sri Lanka didn't even have supply chains, so that is why we cannot even talk about resilient supply chains in this country. So today, the subject of resilient supply chains is not new. It didn't happen because of COVID-19. It had been there in the stream for more than 10 years. There are research papers which were published in the 2010, 2011 about resilient supply chains. And in fact, if you really look at the countries which face the COVID crisis in a stable manner, are the ones who understood these resilient supply chains. A good example is Singapore. And Singapore had worked out, they knew that they had time, because COVID crisis really started in China in November, but we came to know about it in January 2020. So before it hits our countries in February, early March, we had enough time to plan and get ready for the sort of discontinuities that can be expected with this crisis coming in. So that was not understood, because the best example is the food and grocery suppliers in Sri Lanka. I don't want to mention names. Everybody had started web-based marketing just as thinking that it's a done thing, it's a new thing, so we should do it. And they were trying to incentivize it a little bit, but without really paying attention to the major operational issues that could be involved in that. And also they didn't recognize the strategic importance of that network, of that distribution channel in a crisis like what we are facing today. Really speaking, when they knew COVID was coming, they should have paid a lot more attention. They should have strengthened it, and they could have ensured a COVID-free distribution supply chain all the way to the individual homes. Why I say COVID-free means you will have to ensure that the people who are working also take the right precautions and right sanitary practices to ensure there's no contamination of the goods that are being delivered has any sort of contamination. Right now, even if a reputed company comes and delivers goods to my home, I don't think my wife will trust them. She will first want to take everything, not inside the house, outside the house, wash it, put it in the sun, do a lot of cleaning, and then only she would have the confidence to take it inside and keep it even in a cupboard. So that is because our supply chains did not take sufficient precautions, and they did not establish that confidence in the minds of the final consumer that what they are delivering is a safe product for consumption. So this is a major problem. So that is one aspect of the resilient supply chains. And the resilient supply chain really cannot be done only by looking at the final end where you deliver to the consumer, but also you have to ensure that you get uninterrupted supplies. So they would have had to, probably if I'm talking about agricultural production, they would have had to establish link all the way to the farmers. And farmers should have also been trained to deal with it, because some of the intermediaries like the wholesale centers and trading centers which are highly unprepared for emergencies wouldn't have been suitable to become a part of a resilient supply chain. So they would have had to be, we would have had to have certain direct links or clearly demarcated suppliers who are coached and trained and who can handle the goods all the way from the farms to the final consumer without any sort of contamination. So that's really one area where I think Sri Lanka failed drastically. And even the government did not understand the importance of supply chains, because initially they said the customs will clear only the food and pharmaceuticals. But food and pharmaceuticals is not the only thing. The manufacturing is affecting people in so many ways. One, if we do not manufacture things, we are not adding anything to the, no economic value is being generated. So that means the country's economy is going down. So who will supply the goods? That's one thing. Second thing is, manufacturing industries not only have permanent employees who get monthly salaries, but there are employees who are actually being paid on daily work basis. So such people go unemployed and they will lose their source of income. And as a result of that, they cannot face this crisis, and they do not have the resilience even to feed themselves and their families for 1 week or even longer than that. So this is something that needs to be very seriously looked at, both by the government and the industries, to ensure there are supply chains. Now, we would be very happy if the COVID-19 disappears at the end of this month or end of next month or even in another 2 months. But it may not be, because you can see in the countries where it has really, I mean, where they thought it has gone away, is coming back. So they have now second waves coming up. Classic example is Singapore. Singapore was commended as one of the countries which has best managed the crisis. But then the second wave, within a day, they had probably more number of cases than what they had in the first wave. So it can come back because always human beings are subject to either not following instructions or doing their own thing. So as a result of that, the behavior is cannot be predicted in advance, and that can cause second waves and third waves of this disease. So what is important is we need to learn to live with this disease, because we have lived with other dangerous diseases in the past. So similarly, we need to learn to live. That means we have to keep the basic economic activities going on, without which the life will be miserable or even impossible if the economic activities are not happening in the modern world. So we need to continue the economic activities while keeping the pandemics or the epidemics or any diseases that can come up under control. So we need more and more professional advice and professional approaches in managing on one side the health and security issues, the other side the economy and the supply chain and other economic activities which are contributing to keep the country going. Do I have more time?
I think I have one more question. If you can give me a kind of a quick answer. Of course, I can't expect you to give a quick answer. You see, Kithsiri, you and I were working very closely last year. I think no, year before last on the TVT strategy for the Colombo Trincomalee Economic Corridor. So you're very, and also as a trainer and as a lecturer, you're very conversant with tertiary and vocational education and training. Post-corona, do countries have to change their TVT strategies? Do you have to come up with different skill sets, different training programs? What are your views?
Well, actually, Corona emphasizes the professionalism of TVET and the importance of TVET even to a great extent. Because we have a habit, even our companies and industries, if somebody can do the basic things right and get a machine to operate and do something, they think, he's a skilled worker, skilled operator. So that concept itself is wrong, and you cannot work with that concept, because I mean, if you really look around, even with this curfew on, there are few factories which have resumed work, and those are the factories really had HACCP procedures, HACCP or ISO 22000 kind of procedures, because in those factories there was a systematic approach to discipline the employees. They have to follow certain rules because the products they are manufacturing are sensitive. It can be surgical gloves, it can be coconut milk powder for export, or it can be any other pharmaceutical or food item which is going in for export markets. You need to have those international standard manufacturing practices, good manufacturing practices in place. Actually, such manufacturing organizations will not have much of a problem in adjusting themselves to COVID-19 or any other pandemic crisis that is coming in. So they can easily make the necessary changes to their procedures to suit the nature of this particular virus and resume work. That's one of the most important things manufacturers and the industrialists have to realize, that if you want to have resilience in your industry, you should have that manufacturing disciplines in place. It is not a case of doing something, because somebody might argue and say, no, this is very costly and that is adding to our production cost and our customers are not going to pay for it. So how do we do it? Okay, so if you take that view, yes, probably you like to operate the way you are, but it is becoming more and more complicated. The societies are, because some people say there are different arguments which I don't want to get involved. Some people say that there'll be a worse crisis at the end of 2020. Another pandemic or a viral attack which is even worse than Corona-19 can come in. So we have to be ready for it. Or are we going to get perished in all this? So that's the question to ask. So to do this, we have to have our employees very well trained, not only in the basic activities of manufacturing, but also the precautions and the discipline that they have to maintain in ensuring high level of hygiene, in addition to product quality, reduce wastage, high productivity. We also have to look at these other aspects. That is one thing. The second thing is, whether you like it or not, there had been many people arguing in this country. I have been an industrial engineer, and always I had to face those arguments. Oh no, automation is not going to work in this country. We are a labor-intensive country. But if we had automation, such industries won't have much of a problem in restarting production today. because we can't keep that social distance of keeping two workers 1 meter apart in some of the industries. If two people have to hold it from either side and lift something or do something, and so much of manual labor is being used, which we thought we have a lot of manual labor, which is not, again. So such industries will have major problems, even if they have to get adjusted to a post-COVID-19 society, or have to learn to live with COVID-19. What we need is more educated, better trained, more knowledgeable, and better disciplined employees and workers in our manufacturing industries. So that is the way we can build a competitive strength. That is the way we can stop the majority of our people are going as housemaids in various other countries, or unskilled labor in some of the dangerous industries in other countries. If we give this training, and if we make them better, and if we attract the right kind of industries to this country, then standard of living of the entire country will develop. So what I am talking maybe a dream. And in fact, the kind of industries which are supposed to be coming into the Colombo-Trincomalee economic corridor are such industries. And ADB, Asian Development Bank, this is not an American thing. Asian Development Bank is really funded by Japan, and it's an Asian organization. They were the ones who did that study and who paid us as consultants. So their intention was to introduce such a dynamic, productive, and manufacturing sector which will suit some of the resources in Sri Lanka, which would have used the agricultural inputs and sea, marine and fisheries inputs in that economic corridor to generate internationally marketable products. So unfortunately, the cheap politics really pushed it aside. And the political leaders who really understood it did not have the courage to put their foot down and get it implemented. Because if you really look at countries like Vietnam, Laos, Indonesia, and even Vietnam, and most of those Indo-Chinese countries, how they have developed in the last 15 to 20 years is because of economic corridors. And economic corridors was something which was originally, they could have tried in Sri Lanka, but because of the unfortunate 30-year internal disputes or internal insurgency we had, we could not attract any of such developments to this country. That is why the country fell behind by 30 years by the time the war was over. So what is important is we need to at least now recognize the importance of good TVET, tertiary and vocational education, or technical and vocational education and training, and train our people to get involved in manufacturing activities where the resilience will be more because they are familiar with the right productive practices as well as sanitary or hygienic measures that they need to be taking to safeguard themselves as well as to ensure the products they manufacture are free of any contamination. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kithsiri. It has been a pleasure to connect with you and talk. I wish I could kind of discuss so many things right throughout the day. Every time we get together at Marga and we look at our work, you bring in a kind of new thinking and impetus for us to kind of achieve excellence. So thank you very much today that you imparted, I think, lots of things to think about, especially those in the private sector as well as in the public sector. I hope your endeavors will also come into place. Your manufacturing operation will also will kind of manage and cope with all these issues that you're facing. Thank you very much once again. Stay indoors for the moment, stay safe, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.